I'm gonna try to send it to the clerk. That goes to a Russian mobile. It's not where I want to go.
Don't know about that. I'm sure I have a fee for that, Skip.
I suppose it's not really.
That was good. That was your yard.
People at the Enterprise tells me it picks up words that say under my breath. Not good words either.
Those are usually the ones that are under your breath.
They're taking bets down there on how many times I might say it.
It also misinterprets people. Sometimes
Oh, no,
they,
they're listening. I don't think they're typing it. They're hearing it.
oh, they're hearing it.
They're hearing
Mm.
what I might say under my breath, and I never even knew.
Is that sensitive? Weird.
Anyway,
We do a lot of team meetings with the central like that. If I'm doing remote, instead of hearing just people talking, you hear everybody that's there. And that's sometimes surprising. I didn't realize you could hear everybody's comments everywhere.
Yeah, I could hear audience members trying to be quiet during the last board meeting better than I could
Really?
hear them if I was sitting right here. Oh, yeah. I could hear Florence asking, I think
That's
it was
amazing.
Skip, I don't know.
they're whispering.
Some
over
questions,
there.
whispering. I know, but like here you can see people doing it, you can't really hear
Yeah.
that, just because the acoustics in here are challenging.
All right, well, it's 6:02 on July the 22nd. I'm gonna call to order the RICO trustees special meeting, work session regarding the sanitary sewer design, et cetera. Trustees present are Scott Poston, Ben Bernadakis, Crystal Hibbard, Tom Clark, Garish Willis, myself, Pat Fallon. It's my understanding that Greg Anderson will be joining us momentarily, or shortly, I should say. I don't have an agenda. And so I just wanted to see, make this as casual as possible. I know there was some people, Greg is not here. He did leave us with his comments.
There is a presentation as well that was emailed to us.
Did we want to do a PowerPoint? Is that something you guys were looking to do? Sure.
It's a great place to start, I think.
All right, let's have it. Buy Greg some time.
Okay, if I stand. All right, you've probably seen this because Toby had a version of it and I recycled it. Introduce myself, I'm Dominic Pauly, I work with Bohannon at the Albuquerque office. So, perfect. I left this blank because I'll just fill it in. But, so I've been at Bohannon since about 2019. For those of you that haven't met me, I know we've met. I don't think I've met any of you yet. I went to UNM in Albuquerque, so born and raised in New Mexico, in Gallup. Couple hobbies, I love to hunt and fish and do outdoor stuff, but engineering has been my passion, so really wastewater collection system has been my main focus since I've started, so been doing it about 8 years, got my PE about 4 years ago, and most of my projects around New Mexico have been mainly wastewater collection systems. So doing a big one right now in Pueblo Isleta, which is just south of Albuquerque. That's mainly taking homes off their septic tank and putting in all U1 pumps, and so there's about 400 homes. And so know a lot about the U1 systems, and I know that's a big question kind of, you know, for some of these places where they might be, you know, likely that we have to put them in because they don't have another option. But I've also done a lot of large collection systems that are just gravity flow, pretty standard, lift stations, everything else. So just a little bit about me. So I don't know what Toby said the last time he was here, but I do want to just kind of touch base on how we're getting to where we got in these plans and the alignments and how we choose them. And I'm sure a lot of you know somewhat, but I mean, really, RICO has a holy trinity of problems, right? We got crazy slopes, water rock, and we got the river crossings. And so you kind of have all the problems that make a collection system pretty difficult. And so for a project like this where we have a lot of rock, keeping a minimum buried depth of 6 feet is one of the highest priorities because the cost efficiency is going to be key to even build this thing. And so if we're really deep in rock, that's really our one of our major concerns is keeping that buried depth as shallow as we can get. The other one is, this is mainly gonna be an 8-inch gravity main, and the slopes fall between 0.4% as your minimum to about 20% as the maximum, and 20% is super high, but there's some steep areas here that, you know, we might not have an option. But if you could keep between 0.4, 10%, gravity systems are more self-cleaning. They like to reach a certain speed and a certain slope, so that solids travel with the fluid versus you get too steep, your water moves faster than your solids. So
Did you say 0.4 to 10%?
0.4% minimum to 10%, yeah, is typically the range where we try to keep it, you know. I think a 2% slope is perfectly ideal. That's where your most service lines fall, and usually most mains work best around that. Because that usually provides, if you're around 20% full for a gravity pipe, which is pretty normal, that gets you about 2 feet per second. That's like the top speed you want for your solids and your water. So looking at those two things, that is first criteria, right? So do we have the slope, and can we maintain a shallow depth without going 10 feet, 15 feet? And it's a gravity system, and you don't always have the grade, and we do a little working against the grade sometimes when we have to, and you're gonna have your 10-foot manholes. You might have your 12-foot manholes, but as, you know, small amount of them as we can get. So locating mains to as many homes as possible for this project is big, and because of your slopes, right? If you have a house on the side of the hill, a main on the west side of it or east side of it, that's above it isn't gonna work, because that house might sit below the road by 5-10 feet, or your septic tank's on the back side of your house. Then you gotta run a main down both sides. So there's gonna be a lot of that on this project, of just utilizing every corridor we can where it's allowable. There's gonna be a lot of places that have trees grown in, and that's gonna be a town question of, are you gonna clear cut this, or are you gonna piss your neighbor off by taking all those trees out the backyard? But we can show it as a possibility, and that's just stuff we're gonna have to talk about. But for now, I'm assuming these corridors behind these homes that need to be serviced are places where it's possible for now. So there's a lot of those. The floodplains and wetlands. I mean, with the Dolores River, there's a big concern, and I know we'll get into the comments, but gravity collection systems in a floodplain is very difficult. Mainly because your system, and sometimes it's through the manholes. Sometimes if it's high enough, it's not, and you get what's called INI, which is inflow, and sometimes that's not so good. But then you're getting a full pipe from your gravity system. And keeping out of those wetlands, right? So river crossings are an gonna have to get under the river somehow, but there's ways to do that. And so all of that, we have drone profiles and the pipe networks together on our side to make sure what we're doing is just, you know, we're not just tossing it out there saying, we think an alignment can go here. It's proven that, yes, alignment can go here. There's going to be caveats, and we can talk about those where there's concerns too about a lot of those areas that we have concerns about. But the lift station locations, low spots are pretty much key. So there's gonna be low spots in this system with where the river is, and having homes on either side, reducing those is as important as everything else. We don't want lift stations as much as you guys, because this is gonna be, you know, likely a big project where any homes on the gravity system directly to the wastewater treatment plant is the best scenario, because that's the easiest way to get funding without having caveats of, oh, well, we need an easement to get a lift station here to serve these homes. So the goal really should be, how many homes can we keep on gravity to get to the wastewater treatment plant? And putting lift stations in really developed easements. I mean, I get there's certain areas where you might not have the easement and it's the best spot, and we need to look at that. But an easement is probably the quickest way to stall that part of the project, and putting all our alignments and corridors and existing easements is gonna be really important to actually getting this project done on a good budget, because the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets. And then E1 pump locations, we'll get into those. There's just, it's gonna be a reality for some areas, and as much as we want to eliminate those, and I think there's a good possibility there won't be that many of them. They'll be there because you can't get a main close enough to the house, or if it's on a hill, that, you know, you can't serve it, then there's only so many options, right? They can stay on their septic, or they can look into E1 pumps, and we can, Dante knows more about E1 pumps than anything, so I'll let him probably talk about those. They're not, it's not just grinder pumps in general, right? It doesn't have to be E1. They're just commonly used when we do that. Okay, so on those plan sheets, those updated ones, you'll see a lot of colored text. So green, for the most part, is gonna be where I think it's high likelihood and high probability that the gravity main in that area is likely to connect it with the gravity service connection. That's what the green represents, and that those are areas we've looked at, and we're, you know, with a high probability and high confidence, can't guarantee that every single home I show in green is gonna connect, because I know where every septic tank is, but that's what we're gonna look at too. I'm gonna get the full surface, and we can see where it makes sense for that service line to connect to the main. Once we have full topographic for the entire town, which we're getting right now, but based on where the house is located and where the mains are located, you know, it's a high likelihood that those areas look pretty good. But right now, I have about 247 buildings, and you guys might be able to correct me on the total number, but that's the number of buildings that I have identified that could get a service. I'm sure a lot of those buildings don't get a service. They might be abandoned, but out of the 247 of them right now, I'm showing 162 that are estimated to have a gravity system connection for service line. 70 of them would be gravity system connections, but they'd have to be conveyed to a lift station. And so there's 3 lift stations. And so really you're averaging, you know, 20, 25 homes to each lift station. And then I have about 15 connections that I've identified that appear to need a grinder pump of some sort. So, does that, how many connections do you guys have on your water? 230 something. Okay, so there's probably a couple extra houses on there that don't have water, but. Any questions yet? Or do you want me to just finish?
I got one.
Go for it.
Where do you, I this close. And if that's stopping. Where the problem
There's all these yellow dots.
Oh, okay.
You're right, I was gonna say, the ones in yellow are the ones that'll be, going into the lift system, they drain into a lift system, correct? And the ones in red are gonna be the individual systems?
There are a couple yellow ones that just based on where they're at, some of them may be landlocked between other neighbors and they don't have access to a main nearby. On the gravity side, that may need a new one, and we won't really know until I have full surface. But
So
yeah.
the low pressure service or the,
Are red, are, like the ones where I feel like the high likelihood, the red ones are grinder services. Like yellow is more or less, I need more information before I can really tell what's gonna be needed. And there's not a whole lot of those yellows, most of them are where the lift stations would need to go. Here. And so, I forgot to say, for those of you that don't know, Toby is no longer with BHI, but he did give me a very good rundown of his last meeting, and so he was an email guy, or he didn't save everything down, so I had to chase down a lot of stuff. But last I knew, this is the lift station, right? Okay, so Smith and Loveless lift stations, nothing wrong with them. They're above ground, and did he touch on these last time? Pretty good, or no?
It was mentioned, I think.
Okay, so there's really two types of lift stations. You have your submersible pumps that sit in the bottom of the well. Very standard, very pumps that, we do a ton of them. And then there's above ground lift stations, which have gotten more and more popular. We're doing some for Isleta, doing some for Laguna. Pretty much, it just allows you to typically use a vacuum. You need a certain, it's called NPSH, suction that rises on the propeller. That vaporization turns into micro explosions for the bubbles, and distribution helps that. So, big proponent of why Smith and Loveless is being proposed here and why I think you guys like it a lot. I like them a lot. You can work on them without having to get in, pull them out. And they're also pretty close here locally available in Colorado. And with being above ground, no, 1.5 horsepower pumps probably max, because they're serving 15 homes, and we're not pumping them 150 feet up max. So they're very small pumps. They're not going to be very big. Motor is usually a bigger problem when you have another force main coming into a wet well, mainly because force main cuts in oxygen. When you don't have your super goes septic and that's what makes H2S gas, which usually from a force main gas system, here adding every, way to where I don't. Is the issue. When I don't know how there's really two options. I mean, there's an outdoor, but there's also useful for a lot of these homes, because I know you guys have basements where I've seen service lines coming outside of your house. So you could potentially put this unit inside your basement of your house if it works. But typically they just install outside your house, intercept your service line that would have fed your septic tank. And from there, you run a very strange service line because it definitely would the check valve, and so in the event you need to check that, but then you also have just in case, and then typically, and this can be pressure mains, I mean, that connects to a gas system somewhere else. Well, pressure main to the gravity as well. Very low power. I think it's something along the line that one that they show, it looks pretty compact. It's probably like a 4-foot box, maybe. Probably about 72 inches. That's a pretty standard size. That would have about a 70-gallon emergency storage when it shuts off. That's not that much, but it's enough to probably, figure something out.
So does it look more like a hot water tank than a pump that I'm thinking?
So this is just the shell. It's like a corrugated pipe pretty much in the ground. And then the pump is actually an insert inside of it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so like if you were gonna service your pump, you're not pulling this whole thing out, you're just opening the top and pulling the pump out.
So you gotta have at least enough clearance to pull the pump out from the top in a crawl space situation.
Yeah,
And maybe
the crawl space is a good question.
So in there, we probably wouldn't recommend a crawl space installation on that end just because it is cumbersome to get to and you increase the chances of having an odor issue possibly if there's one.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done a lot of these in the Midwest where a lot of people build them into their basements where they have basements. They have a sump pump in there for flooding basements too.
For a full
And they
base.
build one right beside it many times and have their lift pump for their wastewater and come right up their wall 4 feet deep. That's real because we don't have basements as much here on that end, but in most cases, as Dominic said, you're probably looking maybe 4 or 5 foot square to drop. It's almost like a little mini manhole with the motor and stuff in it, just a little lift station that serves that as the waste in there and then pumps it right out on that end. They are quite, they claim 75-watt light bulb annual cost that we run typically for a year is comparable to the cost to do that is what the manufacturers tell you. It depends on how much water you use. 70 gallons or so is typically probably minimum, a day, more like 2 or 3 days use, depending on how let's use your wastewater, because they're just going to, well, it depends on how much washer water and stuff you do too, like domestic water. But typically that's not an issue. Their maintenance on them typically, and there's always exceptions to that, but it's very low maintenance. And, I mean, the last guy I talked with last week, he's got a whole bunch of them, he's 20 years, they haven't done any maintenance on them. I put some in 20 years ago or so at Dolores, I haven't talked with them lately to see if they worked. We came under the river from the south side and took them into the town from the high side over there on the south side of the bluff. But one thing, keep in mind, I think the two big things is an E1 unit or any type of on-lot wastewater is a last resort. That's not something we want to put in, or in the Midwest, they just pick a depth and just run it that depth, and everybody goes on the grinders if they don't do that. But out here, we'll do it as a last resort, or recommend it as a last resort, because it's so expensive to serve mains or whatever, to take care of maybe 3 homes, if you're starting to put a main down at the back lot or something. So it's part of the cost and the value side. And I think, as Dominic said, right now, we're only looking at approximately 15 or so on these. I think one time there was discussion that maybe it was gonna be a whole bunch. And the goal is to minimize those, absolutely, and reduce those to the bare minimum we can. They're not a bad system. That you're talking to 2 or 3 people that have homes here that were from Arkansas, and they were asking me about them, and they said, that's what we have, everybody has them on the Corps of Engineers Lake Spec. Everybody's on those, because the Corps let them develop right to the water at one time, and so you can't get sewer down there. So there's thousands of them in place there and have been for 20 years, and you know, they're proven technology, but again, they're a last resort. If we can do gravity, as Dominic says, or a good hybrid system where we gravity into a lift station, that by far is preferred, and that is the goal and intent for where we go, because it's the better. If you want to put the whole.
I'm asking about the freeze potential.
We don't, if you're, I mean, the water that comes into them is human, you know, temperature, and the water comes from your house is warmer water because it's not frozen. Typically, we don't have a lot of issues with that because they're contained and they hold their heat, you know, in there quite a bit. And as he said, they're set up on a, whatever cycle you want to run them on to pump. You can do it at, you know, 20 gallons or 40 gallons if you want them to pump more often. But it would be, and up here, you know, you guys have a lot colder issues, so we'd make sure that we have enough insulation and stuff. And I mean, they make options to them. I've not seen them heat it per se, but we could look at that as them heated.
And could they be retrofitted into an existing tank?
Health is we have to abandon your septic tank, and by the state regs, I think that means cave in the top and crack the bottom so we don't get water that will be in there, because if we're sealed up and you have high groundwater, you can get flotation and take your septic tank up out of the ground. So we'll have to crack and damage the septic plug, the inlet and outlet line, and in many cases, people would like to have the whole thing removed. You know, and that, in most cases, they'll actually and cover it over. So typically, in the scheme of things, they're a pretty small hole, you know, since they're about 5 foot diameter with backfill and everything. And you have a little bit of room to move it up. Well, you install a bunch. And it's not just E1, that's become the name like tissue, like Kleenex. I mean, there's Myers and there's 3 or 4 main producers that do that. Most of their stuff interchanges, you can retrofit the others with the same equipment. So it's a pretty competitive market. If you go that way, you can get options to bid them competitively or whatever. Like, I mean, it takes so much time, but it's, they're, again, I put a ton of them in. We only did it if we couldn't do it cost effectively through another method. I'd prefer to have gravity sewer anytime or enough on the lift station to make it work that way. Just one more moving part, which historically has got a pretty low maintenance item, but it's, and it's not a big energy issue either. And they've been around long enough, there's no problem with, you know, funding or using things on that end. They're pretty accepted option.
Just so there's no debate, they have those in Lawson Hill. They pipes that come out of there full of effluent all the time, right? It pumps a little bit in, it pushes it out the other end, and
It run, but there's low
it
areas.
stays full. So
We've not experienced those same problems. I put probably certainly hundreds of
Canyon
thousands.
Creek outside of Denver, they've all failed.
I'm like I say, we'll look at some or whatever on that end, but it's,
Just so you know, they've been a problem, I think, in elevation.
okay, I do note it, and we'll say we haven't experienced that same thing, but you're right, that's, anything that's gonna fail, that's gonna be problematic, because you have more moving parts on that, and we prefer gravity flow if we get the chance.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, that's last resort, if for a home, really. And really, I don't think there's a lot of them, so. But yeah, I mean, I know you missed a lot, but,
It's okay.
are you
At 6:30.
ready?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I got your comments mainly. I don't know if everybody contributed to those comments. But I've updated a lot of these alignments since Toby originally introduced them to you. But really I wanted to spend the rest of this kind of just going over them and, you know, making sure you guys feel good about them, about what we're doing, and talk about your guys' concerns. So I have some on here, and I think these were kind of the key ones that I took away from all of them. And the rest are all on those 3 other sheets that I gave you guys. But I did try to put together better exhibits for you guys that kind of show the contours. They're still hard to see because they're only in the corridors that we have them right now. And so they're pretty narrow with the alignments, but you will see, especially on the bigger maps, we have the contours even labeled too, to kind of just show you the flow of each contour direction. And the parcels are on there. On the bigger maps, they're a little hard to see, but you could see them on these small maps pretty good. So you'll see where we're in an easement or where we might be trying to put stuff out of an easement. And I blew it up to a 1 to 50 scale to kind of make it easier, but now there's just more sheets. But so I think main concern, right? Try to decrease the need for lift stations, and so really we're looking at 3. They might not be exactly where Toby showed originally. There was a good comment about the one on Piedmont, about that road, right? That private road that's in question, whether or not you guys have the easement for it. Yeah, I mean, if we don't want to take a force main down that road because it doesn't make sense, we don't have the easement, it's a good point, because it saves you a lot of money and pipe costs to put it down that road. But the question, I think, where that lift station was on Piedmont was, okay, well, why don't we just cross at the same time getting ready
What I'm looking at is, Piedmont is, I don't know, that, and I don't know what the design, needs are for getting gravity flow, but it seems like if you could get gravity flow.
I've been looking at it, it's impossible. I just need, I need the surface to really know for sure. I think a lot of flows coming in, whereas the one on Piedmont's gonna have 15 homes, and you're not gonna have a lot of flow, and your waste, if you did a siphon, would sit at the bottom and all your solids would settle there and you would never move them. You never get enough velocity to siphon them back up. So usually a siphon, you'd have a lift station on the other end of it that pumps 1,000 gallons at once and it flushes that system in one go.
That's what I was gonna mention too. We routinely use siphon projects, large diameter pipe, even some water projects, but with the solids in there, where they'll settle with gravity in that low area, it really makes them problematic, and kind of goes back with what Mr. Anderson mentioned on the grinder pumps. That's one of the issues when, they're not just put them in the ground, you've got to look at your line to where you're going, and ideally you keep it on a grade and not have big bellies in it, because then when it turns off and sits down, you will have solids or stuff try and get in there and sit there. So part of that is, if there's problems on those, probably is related somewhat with design and installation of those as well. It certainly plays a part in it.
But I'm showing on this map, and maybe we can go to the next one. And the bigger maps you guys can see, the better. Yeah, this would work. But so this is Piedmont, right? And so this is where we were showing that first lift station, and really, it's just dependent on whether or not gravity is possible. And this is a big question mark too, though, right? Because you guys don't have that easement, correct, to put a lift station there? You have a utility easement, which I think it's a possibility, even if, let's just say, we don't put the lift station there. This lift station would still probably be a good idea to force main across here, because you have a utility easement, and we could shorten that length of run if you're going on to Piedmont, so that's a question mark as well. And get the lift station up to the gravity collection system further south. But no, I would love to get gravity here. I just need to look at it a little closer. My concern is I don't want to put the manhole in the wetland or the floodplain. So as long as we can stay above the floodplain on this side, or maybe come in at it this way, because if we put it too low or put the manhole in there, it's going to potentially flood and have I&I and a big storm event, and that will ruin your lift station and your wastewater treatment. And so this would likely be completely fused HDPE of some sort with no joints. If we do put a lift station here, this solves a lot of problems, because you could do your gravity from the student housing buildings pretty much to here if you have this easement. All of these homes with gravity collection to that, and there wouldn't be a question of do these need E1 pumps. And so I think it's a great idea to put a lift station there. It's just a matter of, can we get that easement? And really this would be a separate phase, right, from the other rest of the project that we know we can put on gravity and get to your wastewater treatment plant. This would be a second phase, if anything. Unless we wanted to run this as a force main just straight to the gravity system and then worry about because I know this one, it's a question mark on my end too. We're looking at it for sure. We'll figure it out once I have all the data. But I think you got options. I think even if this has to be a lift station, I still think that's a good idea. Maybe put another lift station in. I know that's not ideal, but I think a lift station here benefits a lot by being able to put these homes and these homes all on it and not have to worry about E1 pumps for any of those homes. It just adds more capital. But it's a good idea either way. We'll go to the next. So this area, this is west of the highway at Soda Street, so that's south of the area we were looking at. I think really one of the questions was, what about these? Right down the river and they develop these lots, really impossible at the same time, crossing the floodplain in this area. And we get pretty low to where we have to cross what looks like a full tributary or drainage that the river has. And then we're talking, we gotta make that very deep to get under it, and then I don't know if it is possible to connect to the gravity sewer here. And so I look, when I get that surface, you know, if their homes do get built here, it's likely that this should be a low pressure main that feeds back to the gravity, and they might need a new one. It's just gonna be reality for some of these areas that are just on the lowest end possible of elevation. But I will look at this corridor once I have it. But this kind of makes me concerned because you can see it on the map that that's a full channel that we'd have to go under. The rest of this all looks pretty good. These 3 homes on River Street, if they can't connect to the west or to the east, there is a easement that they have, but it's like old quarry, is that what it was? So I don't know if it's possible to get an easement through there, but if you did, that easement behind their home could route a gravity main to collect those homes back to the gravity system. But I think we could probably make this line deep enough, because I was looking at those homes and their septic tanks are on the side of their house rather than the back of their house, which is a good sign. And it's a short run to that road, right? We're running that service line at 2%. Over 100 feet, you only go down 2 feet. That main's gonna be at least 60 feet. So there's a good chance they can get it tight.
When you say easement, you mean alley.
Alley, but.
These are all right of ways you're talking about. There's no
Yeah,
easement.
right away, sorry, right away. Could be an easement. But. All right, we'll do the next one. So this is North Dolores River Trail, or just south of Piedmont, where there's kind of like mobile home tying area. That's, downhill, so the only way you're gonna connect that is with some type of pressure main. You can't get gravity back to where you guys have the Picker Street Bridge. And so, depending on what goes there, if homes are developed here, it would need to have a lift station or E1 pumps. There's just no way to get any gravity flow across the river going this way. Okay, so the second lift station, just on South Picker Street. It's another one where it's like, if maybe we could gravity cross, but it's also not likely. This elevation and this elevation are the same. So that makes it tough because wherever I end up below the river, I have to hold great with the gravity from that point on. And when I was looking at the surface, I don't have it in Civil 3D, but I have it in other software. I think I was about 25 feet deep just to get the gravity to here, which, I don't know. At that point, I don't think you could gravity south if you put another lift station down this trail road, because it was just too deep. And so really, I think force main is a must at this one. It's also gonna be a lot easier to get a force main across that river than a gravity line. And then from there, force main back up to the wastewater treatment plant. But I know that was another one, but, so. Any questions on that one? Because I just don't think, even if we move this well to this side, and I'll check, right? I'll verify what That's what I'm gonna be at if I cross this river with the gravity collection system. And maybe we could put the lift station on that side if there's a place for these lots, and there's an alley for potential to put a line. Here we have National Forest butting up against this road at, I don't know if that's the actual name of it, but it says Street 2. You would have to get an easement for the National Forest. I think you guys are doing that somewhere else, right? But running a line through that alley would at least serve any future homes developed here. And these homes could still probably how steep this hill is, we might be able to work a gravity system uphill. It's just gonna be a little deeper. So let's see. This is Silver Glance Way. This is the prime culprit of the poorly situated homes. Pretty much all those ones in red are in a very bad spot for any gravity collection system. Can't put it to the south near the highway, you have to take it uphill. Can't go north because these ones sit a lot further below Silver Glance. And so really, I don't see any other option other than some type of grinder pump or pressurized pump to get them to the gravity system. This is the alley I was kind of talking about, where, yes, you could put one there, put a line there, but it's densely populated with trees, and you'd be cutting down a lot of these guys' trees in their backyard, and good luck convincing them. But if you did that, then you could grab all of these homes, right? And I think there's already a road here, so this one looks pretty good. It shows up as an alley with parcels, but it's undeveloped. So it would take pretty good effort to clear cut that and put the sewer main in, but you would be able to likely serve those homes because it would be downhill of them. But
Did I miss it just a second ago, or did you have an idea about Greg's suggestion of putting the lift station down?
down here?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean,
well, I thought it was down by the utility thing at the end of the road.
That's what I was thinking, but I was gonna push it back up the highway, because you also on the other side of Silver Glance Way, those are all platted lots.
over here.
No. The east. Those are all platted lots.
Oh, gotcha.
The bottom of the page.
The bottom of the page, those are all platted lots that could have a house someday.
Oh, yeah.
I assume there's a lot of spots where the sewer's got platted lots with no houses.
Yeah,
Like there's,
these are potential homes.
Yeah.
there's 5 or 6. I mean, I guess the goal is to get sewer to everywhere in town, right?
Yeah, no, for
So
sure.
there's a lot of spots where your guys' sewer ends, but there's a lot of platted lots. I just don't know where you connect it into with that layout if you're not going up the highway.
Originally, Tony showed all.
Yeah.
This, that by having this well down, this is all downhill to there.
Yeah, I think it switches somewhere about right here.
Yeah.
From going downhill this way.
Receiving.
To downhill,
And downhill this way.
Yeah.
And yeah, we originally had the lift station here,
Yeah.
where we would have gravity collect down and then force main back this way. I think there is a argument to do either, I wanted to show this as an option. This one's still in question about whether or not we put it here, we put it here, or we put it back in the original location. location. At any of them and work, turn, moving it down here is a great idea. If there's homes that could be served somewhere else by that lift station here, that could be a good idea. This is a pretty empty corridor, so construction would be easy.
So the one you're showing there would indeed need another easement.
Yeah, if you guys.
It's all private property,
That one-
everything you drew through there.
That one though, the alignment is on town-owned land, that's the emergency egress, and there's a CDOT right-of-way permit, and then Atlantic Richfield said they would be agreeable to placing a lift station.
Along the side of the Columbia like that is town owned?
And then alongside Columbia is the RGS easement, which is for sewer, power, water, utility easement, and.
Even that far up to the
recreation
highway,
easement.
not heading north-south? I was thinking the RGS easement was going
It's where the
north-south,
yellow alignment is.
not between that depicted pump station and the highway.
No, but that's an area that Atlantic Richfield said they would be willing to give the grant easement.
So it's possible to get an easement from a land, but it's certainly,
Probably easier getting one there than asking the Cummins or Durango's for one on North.
sure.
I got a quick question. Just curious, is yes, so is this an easement across here?
It's a right of way.
Actually, that's a right of way there? It's
Yeah.
not an easement, okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's a really well-used alley in Silver Glass.
Somebody mows it.
That's bottom of what, the slope that I bought. What's the difference between a right of way and easement?
An easement, somebody owns a property and then you have the right to do certain things into it. Right away means the town owns that property.
Thank you.
So
That makes
like
sense.
the highway is a right of way
Yeah,
that CDOT has through town.
okay. Okay, that makes sense, because the town has
Tom probably should explain that.
You're still
Great
contemplating,
explanation. Concise.
you're still contemplating which way to go there? Are you looking for input on that?
I think if you guys saw a need or want to have this away from these homes and put it over here, and if you guys feel confident in trying to, make sure that your easements are in order there, that's a very viable option that I don't really see an argument against. The only thing that might get you to have it in the original location, or maybe even down here at that utility shed or whatever that is.
Yeah,
And ride the right-of-way back up to the gravity, you could do that too. That one you got options. So, yeah, your input on this one is great on what you guys might prefer.
Well, I think the cost analysis for you would, I mean, if we're talking about, putting a pump in and shortening the distances versus, the amount of trenching and pipe that needs to go in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that you'll be able to say, these are the trade-offs back and forth, so if the town has interest in saving money versus, making it more, I mean, it all fits into one package.
Yeah, no, and I'll do that. I'll run the options about what might be more pricey. I think just looking at it, this is probably the least expensive way, honestly, even with that crossing. But the one benefit I will say is, let's just say this isn't a reality, putting homes in the valley. A force main down this way would allow these homes to connect to it, because you could tap an E1 straight to a force main if that was ever, wanted.
I have a question, actually for you maybe, I'm just curious so with the layout of Silver Glass and then crossing the highway and it goes down, drops down quite a bit to the river. So it's all, there's a good gravity, there's a good natural slope going down the river. Here's my question, and also, is your whole system designed in every scenario to go under the river? Or do you sometimes, some examples of maybe going over the river?
I'll let you address that, but we looked early on strapping it to a bridge or something, or even coming up with a utility bridge crossing, which in cold weather and the climate we're at probably is not the most productive because we have to protect it from freeze and stuff. And not that there's also rules on what we're putting on. If it's a road, you want to maintain on that end. And I think the discussion, I'll let Dominic, who is designing on that, but I think that is not a first choice or desirable option. Direct filtration issues as much desirable to parking it. I mean, I put them on the side of DOT bridges and crossings on that end, and we've done it in right climates, right situations, but they can be shot pretty easy too, and there's nothing more fun than showing up in the morning on your river crossing, sewage spraying, and generally a lot more sustainable going underneath, even though that initial cost may be a little bit more, but with the directional boring and the high HDPE pipe option, it's pretty, but that's pretty close to
If it was in a casing, like a steel casing, and you just put a normal carrier pipe through it.
Seamless system?
Seamless, as in the pipe
Yeah,
seamless?
yeah, I just mean,
No.
it doesn't have, okay.
And if we end up doing directional bores to get under your river, which is likely the way it would be, then in that case, we're not on grade. We're, if you're jacking a bore and you're on grade, you can put a carrier pipe and shim it up. But if we're actually going on a pressure line or something underneath there, or we're doing HTP, and correct me, I know Dominic spent more time on that, but in that case, the idea of having a seamless pipe is much more desirable in most cases, simply because you don't have two lines. You can't 2 degrees deflection out of a normal joint, and we just don't want deflection. We're in potential groundwater or any situation.
Line across the river.
And actually, we're following up for that too, to Sedona on river. Normally, that's a pretty difficult thing to happen. So I want to learn something from you guys on that.
I think,
When he told us that, I was in disbelief, of course.
I think in Piedmont, you're gonna end up with a high point manhole there going both ways, circling that. I think you're gonna, and then come down the highway right away to tie back into your crossing, wherever that is. So there's no force main, it would all be gravity.
Oh,
Silver Glance, you mean, or Piedmont?
I'm sorry, Silver
Silver Glance.
Glance. Silver Glance Way, you're gonna have a high point manhole is my guess. You're gonna go each way down Silver Glance and wrap it around.
And have 2 crossings?
Oh, right here?
No,
No, top
no.
words.
So it'll come down just above where your logo is, which I like this, by the way. I know
Oh,
where
okay,
they're-
right here,
Yeah.
or,
No. I can come up there again. I think you're gonna end up, I think it'd be easiest. Cause they'll all be gravity. It seems like you're gonna have a high point manhole
this is, I think.
here, and it's gonna go this way.
I looked at, I don't think there's a
And high
way.
point is like here. It's downhill this way and downhill this way.
Yeah.
Where it breaks, so that would be downhill. Then this would be downhill. You could probably hit that before you move across.
Slightly. Okay.
Yeah, I think the main flat wrapping here,
Yeah.
Inevitably, it's gotta go.
the serve home is only on the east side of that road.
Correct, but there are platted lots on the east side of that road. They have to be serviced.
Yeah, so we could definitely do it.
Did you say also earlier, did you say the gradient that you come into the river, yeah, it has to be maintained?
If you took gravity across it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. At that point,
yeah.
uh-huh,
Because like you'd hit
Yeah.
that lowest point and then you'd have to keep it.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, open filling the river is easy as, you guys just told me. That's a possibility too, so.
If you go into the river with this solid jack, can you just pour it out without having to make it rise and dig a trench?
I think so, yeah. I think you could potentially bore from the lift station site all the way to the other side you wanna go.
It might make permitting easier.
Now it's intent, because where those two ends are outside of the wetland, the floodplain, and everything.
And the 404 permit or anything through the Corps becomes not such an issue for those two, because we're not degrading the stream quality if we're digging in it.
If we had better topography, we could see what Greg's talking about as far as gravity in this, where these start to drop down this direction, and you've got a little bit of topography, contour lines here, but take it around like this, instead of having to pump this direction, or
Yeah.
if there's opposition to using this right away.
Well, you would still need those for all of these homes. You would need this right away for all of these homes. What Greg is saying is, the main here, the sole purpose would be to serve homes for the future on the east side here. Because these mains would feed all of these homes.
Most of these
Other
houses,
homes are a lot lower than the ones behind it.
these are a
Well, the
little
ones
higher
that
than
are-
the road bed.
On the west
Yeah, I
side
know.
of that road are all
That's what it is.
below the, like, I'm sure their septics are below the road.
I think it goes from both houses, right? The alley's kind of a crest there for between the homes.
Can't say I've spent a lot of time in that alley.
Especially-
I'm having a hard time picturing.
I mean, the three houses on the bottom are way lower than, they gotta keep climbing the alley.
Well, so wouldn't they, one would just be to serve?
Most of the houses on Silver Glance, as you come up the hill, have walkout basements, because there's enough drop off on the hillside between the alley and the other side of the lot.
You wait long enough for subsidence, those houses won't be there, so.
Y'all think using that alley would be a big issue with the people in Silverlands? who are-
Yes,
Yes.
it's still town right away, so,
Doesn't really matter.
I mean, it is what it is, right? But, yeah, I think people would get their pitchforks out and hear tell us about it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what can we do? If that's the logical explanation, that's.
There's actually 2 tiers of platted lots off Silver Glance.
All kinds of hidden alleys in this town. Nothing good ones.
Next one is and then a set of platted.
Like on each side of Main Street too, you know, they're 12, 14 feet wide. You gotta be 11 feet between the water and the sewer, and the water's running right down the center of the alley. I don't think you're putting sewer down that alley.
There's enough variance if below water, but as long as we're below the water, a lot of times there's a valid argument to still
Right. You also go right down Colorado, or right down the Colorado Highway, right on Wesco.
The CDOT easements are not easy, right?
They're not that hard. There's no reason to be scared to see that.
That wasn't my understanding.
You gotta cross several times. So,
I mean, I do know that's why we're not connected to Empire Electric though, is the CDOT right of ways, because, you know, to connect this, that's the number one reason why we are not connected. And I'm not a lawyer, nor an engineer, so I just had been told that by Todd, who was a regional manager for CDOT. You know, things change, but
so yeah, I'll put this together, like a cost analysis of multiple options. I'll do the gravity loop around. You know, this, because there are no developed lots, do you guys know if that's gonna be like a, do you have any confidence there's gonna be lots there anytime soon? Because that would probably be a good thing to just put towards another phase. Because it could be pretty pricey just to put that much gravity in. It costs, you know, 200 grand.
That's
I
hard.
can tell you there's a guy,
There that people own and pay taxes on. It's a complicated building, but so is about everything that's making lots left in this town, so you never know.
there's a guy up on one of those lots who's been cutting trees now for the summer for a while. I was up there clearing the space.
That's impossible to say. There's nothing planned at this point, okay.
So he's gonna be able to tie in there.
Oh, but that could certainly start a trend.
The other lots, they were trying to do something for, and they got turned down because this hill's too unstable to construct a road onto the geotech.
Okay.
It wasn't feasible.
It wasn't, it was cost prohibitive for the return on investment for that development. Doesn't mean it could never not happen. I
That
agree.
scenario,
That's what I was gonna say, sooner or later,
No, I-
whatever was gonna be working
I
out
agree,
there.
at the current state,
engineering
in
will
current
overcome.
conditions, it wasn't reasonable to construct or do the necessary earth retainage for that landslide complex area.
Obviously, you have to plan for it.
Well, putting houses right along Silver Glance Way is easy.
It's,
If we can
it
just
was
do
the
that,
dream.
make it town property.
I say let's move on.
Indeed. Yeah.
Come up with
There was a comment about this coming this way, and it was gonna break on the top of the hill. Then it starts to slow down, and start having even if we don't bring to serve as many of these flats as possible. Commercial, same situation, even though there's no homes that you could probably tie in from the west to Commercial Street. If there are homes in the east that get built there, they don't have a line to tie into.
Most of that is in an avalanche pad, isn't it?
The flat lots, there's 160, and then there's the ground, so they're all looking into building permits, so there's potential for 10 houses.
Yeah.
But anything to south is.
South of that, yeah,
South of it, what's
that
on the
line
map, I
doesn't
don't
need
think you
to go
can.
much further, because that rest of it is in the high hazard.
You just have to mitigate that.
No residential in high hazard. Per our code now, I don't know.
Gotcha.
And then Silver Street, that one almost has no connections on it. Unless these guys got E1s or something, they could pump to that main. Because this, Silver Street could have a gravity main pretty much the whole way. But there's no homes to the east of it, and the homes to the west of it are in a big hole below it. So, and there is an alley behind it, but we talked about the alley on that hill. I don't know if that's a place to put the gravity line. I don't know if it's possible.
The town right away behind it, it's not necessarily an alley.
Or, yeah, there's a town right away, undeveloped. I am
Why are
sure.
those homes that are in? Am I seeing those colors wrong?
Because they're below Silver Street,
Yeah,
so
Yeah,
we're
they're-
out to the Silver Street.
you also have their own walkout basements, walking out towards the west, which is quite a bit lower.
This is not a lot of this maybe possible to, we'd have to probably cut it for the whole construction. Temporary access road. It's just, it's pricey for the. So that may be a conversation for you guys about that. right away below Silver Street West.
It's open, people drive on
In between soda and commercial?
No, commercial and silver,
That's,
I mean,
no.
silver,
that's not.
Sure, right here,
that's
it turns
just
into the
silky
hillside, right
streets,
above
steep
the
Yeah,
hillside.
that's like one.
There's absolutely no alleyway there.
Alley right there.
That last house.
Peters out above the old
And
shed.
then there was a cut for where your utility was.
it. I mean, is this the hotel? Right.
No, we're above that.
This is the. Street Hotel, and then the hotel is the.
Oh, it's got.
Oh, what now?
As long as it's
Some of the trustees, if Silver Street does get improved or surfaced and it becomes more advantageous to develop, if there's a sewer main on it, the people on the west side can design to hit the main. So the question really is it worth the town's cost to put another main that parallels it in the alley for those 5 houses? I know grinder pumps on property lift stations are something that we're trying to avoid, but in this instance, you have a case of that once that main goes in, it's for those 5 houses collectively. The rest, if you don't hit the main in Silver Street right away.
I think those would be prime
Might be small.
logical explanation.
So that would be a spot where I think the design as presented would be better for the town in constructability and general cost, personally.
Agreed. Green, that's good. Next 2 sheets are mainly green.
You think you can get that, a line down the alley, say between commercial and the highway, and the commercial lots on Main Street would get back up to it in the alley? You'd be able to go in the alley?
I think when I looked at it, like the south,
Behind my house. I mean, on top of the point, I really can't grab the problem, it seems like those guys are gonna have to come back uphill unless you went pretty deep in the alley there.
where do you know whether it's right at 50, how deep are you guys' septic? Come up your house. 2 feet.
I don't know, he seems extreme. Up onto the house, wherever you need it, but a little frost, right? I mean,
We put a clean out in, that could be, your frost depth's probably greater than 24 inches, let's just say 48 inches.
it needs to come out of the house at below 48, right?
And so at 48 inches deep, you could run your line at a 2% slope for 100 feet before you hit 6 feet depth. Is the way to
So grade comes up 3 feet, and you're down at 4 feet, that pipe needs to be like 10 feet,
Well,
9, 10
the
feet.
pipe needs to be about, your pipe will be 6 feet, right, the main? And if you only have, let's say your service line right out of your house is 4 feet deep, you could connect it as 100 feet away, that's.
Right, but when you're coming out at 4 feet deep, and this is at 6 foot deep from this grade, which is 2.5 foot higher than that grade.
And that's good. Because it's,
Yeah, we have a lot of sewers, that one is questionable, a lot of those houses,
but
Main Street in general.
like, once I have the whole town, right, I'm gonna go house to house, or our whole team will go house to house and try to figure out where your septic tanks are first, but, C, we'll probably assume a 4-foot depth at each house. And then we drop 4 feet and then we run 2% and we see where that gets us once we hit the main. If it's above our main, great, if it's right at our main, that's still good. And then that will help us dictate, do I gotta go 6 feet or
under their house or something. We need to know that so you don't have to modify it. The 2% unified plumbing code, in worst case, prefer not to. We want to keep it at 2%, because like Dominic said, if we keep it 2 feet per second velocity, we float organics. So we don't have that stuff, sitting in those preference. But as if we go slightly flatter than that, and it's installed well, it'll work, and maybe that's the difference between having to do an E1 or look at some other means, and maybe worth it in that case, but those will be individual cases. We'll have to look at the cost difference, as Gary said. So what do you want to maintain? What do you want to pay for capital cost? And in some cases, maybe there's some homes that say, as I think the mayor said a minute ago, maybe this isn't part of the initial project because the cost to do 1 or 2 homes is so substantial that this, if we're going to get it funded, I mean, doing all this technical work's fun and kind of tricky, but if we don't get a good funding package, makes it affordable, then we're just going through an exercise right now. And that's going to be driven by making sure we can serve enough people to maximize the bang for our buck, to get enough funding to make it go at a reasonable rate, which will be another challenge, and this is the first challenge. But some of, just like was mentioned, where the intent, I think the description is to serve everything in your service area. And that's the platted lots that are, everywhere in town. Some of those aren't something that, right now, if they're at the end of some road that's up grade, that may not be a cost that we have in that first phase. That may be something that has to come in later and might get creative in that if you extend that road, then do you put in a sewer main at that point, do road work or something different? We plan ahead and eventually say there's going to be down here that picks everything up there. That may not be, the first project fund needs to be the best bang for the buck, because talking today with USDA about things, they'll make us do a right-of-way proof and a certified right-of-way map with the engineer's or the attorney's opinion that it's all legit and you have it, to speed up the getting the work done. And they'll look at the cost per connection, cost per service, see if we have a lot of people that are shovel ready and we get the design done, they'll be more likely to come into good rates. And if they're saying, well, that's real expensive sewer, come, and we only want to give you $5 million for the first phase, what's the maximum benefit you can get so we can justify it on a federal funding level, or table that for $5 million we can serve the most possible people, which means the least expensive sustainable system. And the further we get to the end, the more expensive those connections will be, because they're the ones that are worst case scenarios to get everybody out there. The goal is to get where we can serve everybody or have the infrastructure in place to do that. The cost will be to get those to that point. Right now, it's what can we get for the best value for the dollar spent in order to maximize desirable funding, acceptable funding that keeps your cost per beneficiary the lowest it can, keeps your debt as low as possible, and keeps your monthly rates as low as possible, and lowers your operating costs per design too, because we've talked a lot with some of the funders, and that's one of the first things they say. If we spend, or I forget the gentleman's name I talked with, your utility guy, if they're the two that are out there at midnight fixing a leak somewhere, they want to see that at 6 or 7 feet down, you can fix with your 310 backhoe instead of waiting to order a track hoe in from, Telluride or something, because we can't dig in that cobble at 9 or 10 foot deep there, or 12 feet. So I mean, all those things play into the consideration on this too, to maximize value for that.
Do you have good locations of our existing water, fiber, and
I have pretty good info.
and electric?
And I'm not showing them all in here, I'm showing some of the water.
Right.
It was just too busy to kind of show it at this level.
Yeah.
When we do the next submittal, right, it'll be even closer than this one. And so you'll be able to see in detail where we're showing all those utilities, and then that's when we get into the nitty gritty of exact horizontal location. We try to do it as much as we can right now to have separation from the water and the other utilities, but as we keep progressing, that gets better and better. But yeah, I don't want to waste much time on these areas, I'm talking a lot. Green is good, right? These main areas that you guys have on this side of the highway look like they have very high potential, high likelihood to, this is phase one, right? This is your main concentration of homes. Get these homes to the wastewater treatment plant without a lift station. That should be priority one, phase one. And so the crossing, keep going south and avoid it. This one here at Soda Street across the highway. So I know there was a comment about going north, which you could, but taking it north only really adds to your problem of, okay, well now you're taking it to a lift station you don't know you have an easement for just yet. When you can get across the street, it's back to your wastewater treatment plant.
Well, the good thing is you've eliminated one crossing from Toby's drawings,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a very positive thing.
But we probably added another, maybe two more, right? We maybe added the ones at the student housing and then the one at Silver Glass, is south of that.
Well, there were, yeah, okay.
There's three initially. Now there's potentially four with the removal of nets, so. We added some crossings, but I think in some cases it's more convenient to do that. And I think the ones that are going
Hey, just talk about phasing for a second. I think it was USDA and DOLA, no, whole town first, all, and we were like, well, we don't have enough money. So I don't know if we can phase it.
We
Well, I
can't.
like it like that. We can't get the money to build the whole thing for the whole town, then it has to wait until we get the money.
I got you, I'm just saying, like, that was part of the issue.
Well,
I met with Dwayne Dell today, and Dwayne is the heads that just got promoted from the regional guy to the national office with USDA Rural Development. He's the one that actually put that money together. He pulled out that, showed me what went on last door, and that was total about $6 million at that time. But he actually today in talking to her, he goes, yes, but based on if we can go back to the national pool, which here coming up next month, they'll look at the pooling for the national events, and we can apply for that, which we have to go through their normal water and waste disposal grant loan program to do that, which we're prepared to do to get that going. But he said, no, he said, ideally, we want to look at as much as you can, because if we get the biggest bang for the buck, theoretically, we get a bigger return for the number of services and reduce your cost per connection for debt service. But he said, looking at it with the cost of construction nowadays, he goes, I suspect you guys are going to have to go at least 1 or 2 phases to make this happen. He said, with us, he said, I could see pretty easy knocking out 5 or 6 million a pop if we did it phases through that. And he called today Irene, who is running that program. That's not the only option. They just have quite a bit of money available, and he's been following this project a long time, like I said. But he looked at it phased that way, and part of what they look at is what would be the cost per connection, and it's a double-edged sword, because on one, if our cost is high, it motivates them to bring more subsidy together, because they look at it from the standpoint of what's the maximum service monthly fee your citizens would be willing to pay to do this. It's got to be near the state average, or it's got to be justifiable. So a lot of their subsidy is driven by getting those fees to the right service areas of what it would be. On the other hand, if serving enough people to make their money cost effective to spend it, they're not. Let's find this balance to maximize the number we can serve, to create enough debt service to be able to take on debt, to get rid of this, to expire this debt over, 20 years, 30 years. USDA will actually do 40 years in worst case scenarios. They do 30 routinely, but their rates right now are based on a federal average. So what are they, 3 or 4%, where some of the rates we can get practically close to zero, certainly 1.5%, 1.5. I know Chauncey's talked with SRF and we talked to them about getting their cap right, that high subsidy is about $3 million to be competitive and ensure that we can create rates that will meet your needs and your citizens' needs for a reasonable amount of the state average before the funders will support the project. But we can, and you're right, I've had projects where they say, no, we want to do it all now. So big and the funding's so much smaller.
How many connections would they be looking at that would make it worthwhile? Is it out of the 240 some potential connections? Are they we would know?
Because they're looking at how much, when that federal pool money comes back, they can get up to, some of the big projects they've done 80–90% grant. If we can do that, it changes the whole dynamic. If they come in on typical USDA disposal, which is 65% grant case usually, suddenly they on a case-by-case basis, never seen them, that we can generate revenue that allows you guys to have a reasonable rate for your benefit of receiving service, but also we can create enough operations profit to keep the wastewater treatment plant viable and pay for the operations of that. If we can't provide the operations and maintenance, stay in compliance, then they've just funded something that's another problem for them. So we're gonna have to make that case and demonstrate.
Part of the problem with all that is you can run service to 100 houses. Are we gonna force them to tie into it regardless if they have a brand new septic? Or are we gonna not allow new septic permits? And if you need a new septic, forcing all our people to double down on money they may have just spent and spend more. Maybe they need an extra 10 grand for the grinder pump, who knows? We incorporate it and make them do it all. And I feel if we still do that and pursue a partial phase, and we complete a phase, I'm sure the target for that would be Main Street. We still might not have a lot of people project from there. And so what's the timeline on this insurance part? Would we need to argue again to doing that?
The engineering should be sustained. It's different. Crossing the state road, and some of those things would have to be revisited somewhere down the line to ensure. For instance, we just years ago and they didn't have enough money to do it. So we got them funding now to do the whole thing, and for the permit for that, all we got to do is demonstrate the well house meets the new requirements for construction. So it's pretty minimal in their case. And I think for a collection system, mostly gravity, nothing's going to change on that end. So you would have to revisit it. Usually they're looking at 5 years, 7 years, probably to look at that, but it should be extremely minimal to refresh that if it's conventional construction.
I'm bringing this up because we've done this before, we've paid for it before, and I know you guys have used some of that information in your work, but it's still costing several $1 million for you to do this. So are we going to be up against that again? Probably a portion of it, right?
That'll be a small amount there. There should, if this has been approved by CDPG and by this every way, we come back in 7 years, 8 years, say phase 1 or 2 are done, here's the remaining of the plans. What they probably will say is, I want to see revisiting the cost estimate, the construction methodology, and I want them re-stamped, by a current P and resubmit to us, and we'll do it one time. But it's not like we're going out and hiring survey, and other than areas maybe you've had some major earth changes in.
So what's the difference between the engineering we had previously and this? It just wasn't as advanced as we're doing now?
To my knowledge, there was never engineering at the design level before, there was preliminary engineering reports.
So it just wasn't as extensive as we're doing.
Correct, you guys paid for maybe 10 PER studies over the last 20 years or so, to my knowledge, but I'm not aware that you've actually had an engineer that went out and.
We had shovel-ready plans for the sewer and
Right.
treatment.
Pardon me?
We had shovel-ready plans for the sewer and the treatment.
That was at
The
the site
difference
down
was
below.
the site was so
quite
much
a bit
farther
below
down.
the canal.
Exactly, because there was stuff going on, that was gonna make trade for the Forest Service stuff.
Yeah, there was some, because I worked when Eric Hill and stuff was here, then looking at some of those sites, and it was, some changes, pretty substantial change things were at that point, but I don't see, I mean, certainly there's, guarantee, but I don't see this changing if it's conventional, conventional design. And one of the things that we'll look at too is CDPHE's discharge requirement, which probably will get more rigid down the way, although this treatment system that we're proposing should meet some more extreme side as well too. But if we can't make it where it's cost effective to make it go, on that end, then the best design in the world, we're not gonna get anywhere if it's not affordable. You guys don't find it, ability to maintain it. So that's the crux, is create the best value and serve the most people and find that sweet spot that makes it affordable from a standpoint of funding.
In a community of this size, and based on experience, and if I understand, that service fee is the same as a monthly bill, what does that look like?
We're still looking at that in two things. One is there's actually a hookup fee too. And one thing was mentioned a while ago, Chauncey and I talked about this earlier, and I'll come back to your question. Don't let me get off of that. To look, usually something on a project like this, you look at called. And anytime, we've done a bunch of these, if you go in tomorrow and say, okay, everybody, here's the hookup fee, and here's your monthly service fee. And I already talked to two people, one from Arkansas, one from Texas, July 4th, that said, I put a new septic tank on my home here 6 months ago. Whatever your service fee is gonna be, do I pay the full amount? I said, you might end up being determined on what your kind of methodology for. You've got a lot of fast development going on right now, second homes and stuff. Then a lot of those folks are gonna include if they just spent $40,000 on a septic tank, and they're saying we need a hookup amount for this.
Myself included.
Yeah, and part of that methodology is gonna be, okay, two things are gonna happen. One is, if you don't have an ordinance in place or a method in place that assures that X amount of people are gonna hook on and pay services at a certain time, the funders aren't gonna close the financial thing on debt service. This much money loaned at this many years, and you've got 102 connections. They're gonna look at that and say, how soon are those connections on? Because if we're gonna pledge the system revenues from that 100 homes, they darn well better be willing to be on and pay their debt, because if they don't, you go into default, on that end. So we'll have to commit and come up with what the scenarios do. We've seen those from a local ordinance, like an overlay zone, where you say you've got 1 year from when sewer's available, and actually the state of Colorado actually has, 2 years, I think, that they typically, it's kind of loosey-goosey here on their laws on that. But they've got a criteria where they say if you've got sewer within X amount of feet of your property, you need to be hooked up within 2 years, or we can start charging service anyway, if you're not. The other side of those, some communities put the other thing, saying, we'll let it go 10 years, but if the property changes hands, it has to be brought current on rates before it gets retitled under the ownership. Or in some cases, like when I'm going to do a real high growth area, like those big growth along the Colorado River in Arizona, we came up with a couple of criteria where if you've spent X amount of money on your system and it's this new, you can get a credit toward that you can prorate cost until you recoup some of that investment, but then you eventually go back to full rate on that. And so it's not a major hit where you're not saying, I spent $40,000 on a connection 6 months ago, and now you're asking me to spend another $50,000 to get connected tomorrow. So there's ways that have to do with your city ordinances, your land use codes, your methodology of assessment for how you want to fund the project that will be part of that mechanism, and that will have to be done within the funding guidelines as well, to assure the funders that are going to carry the note on it that they will see a return. What you're doing will create enough enterprise fund in your wastewater to create enough debt service to pay this debt over time instead of them making a bad loan to you.
And I do see that being a problem. It's something the board should discuss before we go too far. What is the potential for some of these rules? Because we certainly be driving people, our friends and neighbors, out of their homes. They're gonna have to sell and leave because they can't do it. So we need to understand that very clearly and know what we're doing before we engage in something and say it's halfway done and sorry, this is the result. That's extremely important to me. I mean, I want to service everybody, but to push it, to force people into it, or to pick an area, say Main Street, that involves other less expensive neighborhoods. Now, the developers are probably coming in and pay for a tap and for use, even though they haven't developed the property yet, no problem, they're gonna get rich on it, you know? The people behind them on either side that are forced, whether they just put a new septic in or, you know, lower class working people that are just gonna get run out of town, you know?
And the real,
That's not my goal.
no, and these same questions come up on every time we do a community that's previously unsafe. One of the reasons this project did, and maybe that was the wrong term of word, is you all through, I think, preliminary engineering design work. So at this point, and through the final design, there's no out-of-pocket expense where you guys are burning money and then we come back and say, gee, the project's not doable.
That's why we're all here.
We don't wanna waste people's money as well, you know what I mean? And that's just, you know, I mean, for some of us who have lived here for a very long time, we look at people like our seniors, that people welcomed us into the town a long time ago, that are now on a fixed income, they built their own houses. And what the biggest fear that I see is them, no mortgages, no nothing, being cashed out. If this, you know, when you start a project, and then all of a sudden it's over budget, like, especially this route, frequent, what do you do then? I mean, where does that revenue come from?
And it is, and it's the spirit of all these, because it's not affordable. On the other hand, if you don't have water and wastewater, you get to a point where you can't be environmentally, you know, responsible to pollution stuff, so it's a rough situation. One of the things is to be in line with the state averages or show justification.
What is
it?
What is
It depends on, I'd have to look recently on that, probably, I've never seen it probably below 50, but probably $50 to $70 is probably across the board roughly. Now there's people who do probably $300. The average that you see across the board for a system is probably, and I'm just shooting it here, $50, $70 or so a month, and that is.
We could consider us to be the high end, given the challenges of the terrain and the way that that
Yes,
sits.
absolutely.
And the maintenance that we're gonna have to deal with, because that's gonna be huge for us as a municipality that, you know, obviously our race streets aren't that great.
And the hookup fee is a big part of it too.
Oh, absolutely.
Your property values and what you get for the money, and that has to be something that works. But one thing I threw in there today, dealing with USD with Dwayne Dell, who's now in the national office, he looked up your local non-metropolitan median household income for me and looked at that against the state. The state's is, I think, I got my wrong notes with me, but it was 78,000 or I actually put over 100,000, I think, on that. But you all were 58, I think. I put 58 or 55. All we have to be is 80% of the state to get maximum subsidy from them. So from a rate standpoint, you'd be most of these will actually be with USDA or with HUD or some folks, and if you folks that are low, they're installing their on-lot service line, there's cost in that too, and that has to be hooked up in there. But in the past, we've actually got with USDA or folks, put some workshops where they came in and were available for a day or two at your community to talk with your local folks and come up with some grant participation for them to do the on-lot work or subsidize some of the low and moderate income projects. So we normally see that and work that side of it to make it work too, to try and make it more palatable. Because I've gone door to door on these things and sit with a lady that, I mean, I think I've seen a lot, but I was pretty much in tears when I was leaving. This lady was on fixed income. She showed me, pulled her checkbook out, and showed me what she spent. She was giving more to the church than she was spending to feed herself, and she didn't have a penny left over for a service line, and we got USDA rural development to pay for a complete on-lot septic tank hookup and everything on that end, and that's, in some cases, that's gotta be done, or it's not gonna happen for everybody.
So it'll be down the road a ways when there's more financial analysis done and more research done into grants and that sort of thing, but, what I'm hearing you say is that for low-income people, there's an opportunity maybe that they could have their costs for hooking up, installing the sewer line to their house, heater line, could be covered by grants.
That's it, I can't guarantee, but I've done, every project like this I've done, we've had some participation by subsidy for on-lot, low and lot income folks on that end, and it's kind of incumbent on us. Get them involved, make them available for people who want to meet, talk about that process. I've done a bunch of their applications myself on some of those to help people get that going, and there's not, I mean, there's not a ton of them, but there's people that need help, and these are expensive propositions, and doing this on-lot work. If it's a 50-foot one on slope, that's one thing, if we can be 4 feet deep all the way. If it's coming around the back of the house and abandoning a septic tank and taking out 2 trees and being deep when you get through it, it can get pretty pricey to do your on-lot.
So your conversation right now has to do with the hookup fee?
That with hookup fees related to that, or actually not the hookup fee,
Meaning
the install
He
cost.
might not have to pay as much as I do. to
Correct,
hook
yeah.
up.
If this, what we're talking about right now is actually the private lot work that has to be done to get from the home to the main line or the right of way, the front.
Somebody pay $1,000, somebody else could pay 5 or 6.
It's
Or way
absolutely,
the hell more than that.
that's true.
We don't know.
We won't know that until we get the main line sort of roughed out, see where people's connections are, which is part of what Dominic talked about on locating septic tanks and seeing which way they're coming out. Because some of these will, if they come out the back and they have some good slope, maybe it's a really long run, but it's would be expensive, but we can get it to the front. In other cases, they can't be deep enough to catch the main, or they'll be too deep to catch the main in the front. So then, if you have 1 or 2 homes that do that, suddenly, if we do the back lot right away, or if we do that, that main line will have tens of thousands of dollars for the city to put another main in that may not be needed unless that's the case. So that comes to what Gary, I think, talked about is when we look at these scenarios, what's the cost for option 1 versus cost for option 2, so you can compare cost and benefit analysis. Say, does the city want to put another maintenance project to serve the 8 homes that can't get served otherwise, or is this a place we look at the E1s, or we look at another lift station? And those, we're at 30% design right now, which is fairly conceptual, but this will start getting fleshed out a lot tighter as we move forward on this. And as we get that further, we'll have a lot more information on the cost and get updates on those. We just got updated on the pump stations today, new information, and and we need to talk to some of your local contractors that have worked here locally that know what digging in this cobble and this hard rock's like. We've looked at all the geotech and stuff on that end, but this is expensive digging here, and it's a small system, but in the reality is it's a very complicated one it is, and to do it right and to do it well and do it affordable is pretty tricky. And I certainly think we're the people for the job, but that can be argued. But that's the trick. That's the fun part for us, is to make something that works. We can design anything you want and make every lot in this town served, and you never afford it. And how do we get the most served for the minimum cost to make it work and get enough people on board that it works?
I have a couple questions. The additional grinder pumps for the infrastructure. Ease some of that burden.
We actually talked about that quite a bit. We've done it both ways since it's federal money most likely, or even state money, you're in violation of the anti-donation laws unless you actually have access to it, have some agreement to operate and maintain it and install it. With the years, it's probably not preferable, most kids gonna be, and we'll design for that. But you're relying on much like water system. That's pretty typical. However, if it's your 4-inch effluent system and turn that into collection, in that case, the owner, the tenant, have to own the right of way that it's installed in, and would have to actually do the install to spend money because they need the owner and own the warranty and have that 1-year warranty period. You could probably, and we've done this several times, at the end of 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, so at that point, it back to the homeowner. At that point, they're responsible for all costs, and that's one way to do it. That's just a way to provide state or federal money that creates value for a private individual, which is something they don't want to see. We've not had a problem making the case in that, but most communities don't want to own that on private lot thing, because as soon as you go into, they're not going to maintain, well, I should say this, and the ones I've done many times, suddenly a tree grows over the top of the septic tank, and now it's, or in that case, a connection, they didn't abandon septic, so we want to come in and maintain that. I said, now, my grandmother planted that tree, you're not touching that. Well, just to maintain it, we're taking it out, but it still doesn't keep them from suing you, so it creates some complications on that end. You're cleaner not to do that, but there are ways to do that. If you said, we want to subsidize these 15 that have P1s, there's ways to make that happen if you have to.
Well, and I think too, we could incentivize hookups faster with lower connection right away as soon as we have a treatment plant ready to go. So people could take advantage of those lower costs by jumping on the boat quicker, which is good for our case as well. But something else we could consider is letting people perhaps pay those connection fees, or for that E1 system, maybe in a payment plan along with their monthly fees, so their monthly fee would be considerably higher for the years that it takes for them to maybe pay off those upfront costs. And I mean,
we've seen that where they do it like an ad valorem tax, where you actually make it part of just their yearly taxes, and maybe they pay only capital costs per year and loan amount so much and get pretty reasonable. And if you bond it, then that would be normally something that would come up for a portion that's bonded as part of that. How do you make that assessment payment? And in some cases, it's tied to the county's ad valorem tax on that. There's pluses to that if you make it so there's no penalty for early payoff. Otherwise, you're financing someone for 30 years on their sewer line, and maybe that's not swing at me for that, and I said, there's a certain cost to doing those things, but there's ways to do it and offset that, and you're right, and also paying capacity up front. I mean, if somebody says, I'm going to develop for 5 years, but I'll pay capacity if you guarantee me in the next 10 years I'll have service, there might be a chance for them to pay a reduced rate, yet help the system go to say, we're paying for having capacity in our wastewater plant, so I know when my subdivision is developed, I'll have sewer there. There's methods of doing that, or a prorated for if you're gonna, I think if this goes and the fund's pretty good, you can say anybody that hooks up in the first, before it's done, or the first 90 days or 120 days, not before it's done, but commits, we'll pay a subsidized rate, we'll give you a bargain rate to come on early. After 60 days or after 6 months when it's available, the rate goes up to this. And then I think one of the last ones I did in Arizona, we actually had 3 different graduates where when they went on a year and a half later, they paid almost double what they paid up front. And in doing so, we had a lot of people pay up front, which created debt service, which got them from not taking on so much loan on the project. So again, you want to treat your constituents the best you can, but yet we've got to find a way to make it affordable and acceptable, and to a point that's it's reasonable and people don't You know, if nobody thinks this is a good bargain and worth the value for them, then they're not gonna be part of it, and we've lost the battle.
Absolutely, I don't believe in forcing people into something they don't need.
Yeah.
I mean, Of course,
It's
there's-
tough selling this town, I'm just saying, you know.
And your first year of hooking up, your costs are likely to be $100 a month, $1,200. $10,000 hookup fee, something like that, right? So we're up to 1,100 plus your expense of connecting from your house to the line, another 6,000, 7,000. It's almost $20,000 in the first year. Flush your toilet, what you're doing currently free. It's
and
tough.
so you have to redo your septic.
And then it's, then that's 20 grand. But you pay in the first year of signing on to this.
I agree.
Just throwing it up.
Let me just try to sum this up. I think we need to have this argument, I don't think this is the time to have that
I
argument.
agree.
I think we do super appreciate everything you guys are doing, it's what we need to do to advance in the future, trying to be a civilized community. I do think, I'm serious, I mean, right, so, and you guys are doing it, I just don't want there to be any implications that we need to keep going and pursue parts of funding. I think there's a lot we need to understand, that's our responsibility, not, we might come to you for information and stuff, but it should be our responsibility to start looking at how will these people do, what are we comfortable doing, what are people, so on and so on. We can put that on the agenda in some fashion in every upcoming, meeting that coincides our progress with the sewer, but.
I just wanna expound upon what Pat saying too, is that it is a catch-22. Because without having designs, without having, sort of a rough estimate of what this project's gonna cost, we can't apply for grants, we can't do that. So this is, in a town like this, is it's hand in hand. So just to,
Well,
to expound on what he's saying, I mean, I don't know. We want your input on how to proceed with this without going more effort. It's just gonna be blown up. If we can't afford it, it'd be nice to know, but you want the rest of your rough idea. I'm extremely proficient at getting us good money for grants, whatever, but, just it's one of those things, it's a fine line, so.
You're right.
I agree with what Pat is saying 100%, we just wanna make sure. And this information is incredibly valuable for us, just getting an idea of what, I'm a builder, so I understand, the cost of doing this and lift stations, this all makes sense to me, but we need to,
You're absolutely right, and if it's not, I can tell you right now that if you all just would go out and bond for 240 connections and build this thing, there's no way in the world it would fly. You can't get rates high enough to make it go. If it's not a substantial amount of subsidy that's grant funding, it just doesn't pencil out. And
and
so,
on top of it, it's the maintenance cost too.
they do it all the time. It's not, getting involved doing that, it makes a little difference. start with looking at the funding agencies right now. And yeah, for them at the moment, say, let's start running the numbers. How much subsidy can we provide? And if somebody comes back and says there's no subsidy, talked to before on that too. He's told me 5 times today, he goes, I've been following that project for years, and I really want to see that go. That's a good project. So I know we've got people that are willing their shoulder against it, try and make this thing go. You know, and they know they're gonna have to. I told them, Dave, if we can't, I think we've gotta be at 80% subsidy to get it to the point we, you know, that we need to be. And I think I told John early on, you know, 90% is, I think, to the point that it makes good sense then. And true, there's the bonding side of it, you know, when debt service and how much you got, there's a lot more. But like at the moment, I talked with Congressman Hurd about 3 weeks ago, talked about your project. He says, yeah, I'll sign up for more, you know, congressional directive, but typically those guys only knocking out 2 to 3 million apiece when they do that. We just got 2 awards from him for Norwood on their water system.
That's what I was asking, or thinking about.
Those are about.
Do we need to get her to come here and look at our system and get really behind it, or is he okay with it as?
We talked about it for about 20 minutes the day after a Club 20 meeting down in Greenwich. And we talked with Senator Bennett a little bit, although now that he's not running for governor, he might have a little different come from on that end. But at the federal side, through congressional directed spending and with the EPA community grant funds, at the moment are pretty good in those smaller increments, those 1 to 4 million. USDA has their federal funding. They've actually funded a bunch of projects at 5 or 6 million. And talking with Dwayne today, I've seen a couple they've done, I think at the much higher than that, 18 million. He was going to try and look those up because he wasn't familiar with those, but they only do about 1 a year. And with this new congressional directed spending, they take that federal grant money off the top. So if Telluride gets 5 million, 10 million in congressional directed go toward a project here, you know, but the federal funds are at the moment more than the state funds. Just a few days ago, he says they're going to open up the, which come right up, they'll open up the energy impact mineral funds again. He doesn't think it's going to be very big. The award, they'll be gone quick. He does have some of the DOLA standpoint. It's going to be pretty rough sledding for those energy impact mineral funds that we've had pretty good access to. Actually, Patrick, so that's what he was telling me too, on that end. But
Well, I'd imagine that the smaller grants, regardless of where they come from, trigger the need to progress on the project. If we ask for 25 million, he says, well, here's 3. We need to start the project and do something, which is where the phases come in, or whatever it might be. Are there any of them that let you bank it until we get enough to actually do what we want?
the congressional stuff that Chauncey's already gotten, they're actually giving us what, 20 years that we can keep that for construction, and supposedly it's protected, which scares me to death. I don't.
So maybe that's what we need to look into. But I think there's a lot of information that we need to sit and talk about, decide what we want, what we need. And the rules, there's a lot to them. It's not gonna impede progress, what we're doing now. We need that engineering, we need to know how it's gonna work and the cost and all that stuff, so.
Without a PER, which you have, and all that, and without a relatively engineered and preferably a finished design as Mr. Anderson was shovel ready. If we can make that case, we rise to the front of the pack for consideration. If we have a project that shows it's cost effective and it resolves an environmental concern or issue, and we've got this waterway, the Dolores on that end, and we're looking at putting a treatment plant in there that's an MBR system that's gonna discharge very high quality water versus what's washing down right now, probably from septics. I mean, there's a lot of people pursuing this, that support this project because of that. The trick, I think there's plenty of support, I think there's people wanna fund it. The trick is how to get that funded and get the subsidy to the point that it makes it palatable and acceptable to you all as the governing body. You don't know how many government bodies I've been sitting in front of where we did projects and they had to rate the rates, so I gets voted out.
It's not just us governing body, you know, in a small town like this, it is all our constituents too. You know, it has to be, you know, palatable to the entire community, not just the several people sitting behind this table.
And the sewer system in itself, the theory as a mill levy to pay for it. In essence, we ourselves and tell people you're paying for it anyway, I need the extra 20 grand you want.
Information, though, we can go to the citizens and say, it's not 20 grand, it's 22 grand, or 17 grand, or whatever, so everybody knows.
Well, you're not gonna have to tap in until you need a new septic, which case you would have had to spend the money anyway. I mean, there's reasonable things in here, but I need to identify the rules in which we're.
That needs to be presented to that are gonna money. Is
And
what
the
it
funders,
is. Maybe the things we can think about is just, there be some blocks that come together with you guys again, and, you know, I think we're. No,
I didn't want to interrupt you. I think this is super important, but I want to steer the conversation, if we could, back to the system that you're here to introduce us to and show some things about. I wondered if, earlier tonight, you mentioned some of the hurdles to building the system. And one of the things you mentioned was flash rains, like the heavy storm systems we have, and then how that might, you know, penetrate the system. What I wanted to know is basically around that idea is, when calculating the challenges to our system, how much do you put that item as one of the harder challenges with runoff, intense storms, penetrating system? Second part of my question is, have you seen that in the industry for a while? Have you seen that as weather patterns have gotten more intense? Have you seen that become a bigger problem for systems? And you know, heavy rains penetrating the system. And the last part of my question is, do septic tanks endure that better? An individual system located around town rather than one whole system. The septic tanks, do you know if they endure those kind of intense storms? Does the system maintain itself a little better? You know what I'm trying to say, rather than what we're building here? That's my question.
I'm gonna take a step. I mean, to answer your question, or to address your question, part of it is just good design criteria. I mean, as Dominic said, in the floodplain, we know that we've got a chance of overtopping, and in that case, those manholes are gonna be designed with solid lids or sealed lids, and stuff have to be waterproof, watertight. The other part I was looking at, to cross that river, we have to do scour analysis and analyze how deep we're gonna be, what's the material geotech to make sure we don't get something scrubbed up. And the worst thing we can wake up to is have a raw wastewater spill along that river. I mean, that's something we don't want to be part of and to deal with. So,
do you feel like technologies like, as the weather patterns get more intense or change, do you feel like there's why don't you kind of try to follow this to try to make these systems endure that better?
We have a surface water group that just does erosion, MS4, all kind of stuff like that too, that gets involved there. But anywhere that you have grade like we have here, and you have the kind of precipitation, even if it's not getting worse or getting better. I mean, I was in a storm yesterday, it was probably the heaviest rain I've ever been in my life.
Yeah, it was,
And, but we still look at that from a standpoint of when we're designing this stuff, it's still prudent to say, okay, what's our, yeah, we're not a 150-year storm, 100-year storm, but what's prudent if we're gonna put it out here on the side of the road? If we're gonna have something come down this road, we've gotta be able to protect it or arm it or whatever. So that's part of any design. I don't know if it's getting any worse. Maybe the water is getting worse because we're seeing more fires, we have more burn scars, we have more surface sediment moving on that end.
yeah.
But I think our standard design criteria cover that, I believe. So I don't, that's a serious concern. I'm not sure that it's become more concern, other than just we see it more often because there's some surface water movement with some of the more intense storms we have in on that end. But on the septic tank side, I've seen it both ways. If you get a bunch of water that sits on top of your septic tank, by code, you're supposed to have a riser that goes into your septic tank ports that has a lid on it. I suspect most of your people, or a lot of your people in town don't have that. A lot of people in Colorado don't have that. A lot of people in the West don't. But if you have that, are those plastic lids that we use a lot more actually going to keep water out from going in the septic tank, which more and more they're not, although we like to have them 6 inches to a foot above the ground surface minimum. And ideally, like mine, I have at my house, I'm on a septic tank. I have a concrete lid on that you can't move it. I've got it weather sealed underneath there. But if you have water sitting on top of your leach field, we can argue that forever, but most leach fields don't lose their water going to the aquifer. That's my opinion, experience. Most of it's lost through evapotranspiration and comes up, and it's lost through evaporation on the top. Either way, some of it certainly goes down. Water sitting on top there, you're saturating your soils in your leach field, and you're going to get contamination, and you're not going to make your leach field work very well. So
Okay.
I'm not sure there's really one overriding benefit or overriding answer versus the other. They both can be impacted by surface flow and debris flow, and they both can be relatively protected by prudent design on both. So I'm not seeing that change our dynamic of how we design, at least
Or what
what
we
I
choose.
on that. I don't know, Dominic, if you.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add to it is the main problem with the infiltration that we see in systems is usually systems that are completely stable.
Obviously,
Louisiana.
Yeah, something like that, and we even have them in New Mexico.
Crystal, do you have any, because you have some experience with this, do you have any? To add in terms of the septic and how they handle?
If you're like, I mean, I don't know, in this town, she would know more than anybody, but, I mean, you just don't see surface water accumulating
No,
here,
no.
by, well,
Yeah, actually, down the highways.
I mean, but
Yeah.
there's mine tunnels that go underneath the river. Walk under with.
That alluvial that stuff moves pretty fast and short circuits. So
And we don't have clay, I mean, clay, as you get farther down valley, clay becomes a big issue with septic systems, but.
I sent a
Well,
picture
thank
of
you. I
Chauncey on the
appreciate it.
4th that I was sitting down there by the river where the ducks were captured, and there was a little puddle there by my chair. I'm sitting there watching it. It's just every 10 seconds it bubbles for 10 seconds, just bubbles coming up out there. I took a video of it. I've got it. And I sent
There's
it to-
CO2 coming ditch all over town.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could have the
Up in
reconversion of Perrier.
Up in
and
Piedmont,
not
there's a
the
valve you
process.
go open, that's pretty funny to listen to. It's just CO2 coming out. That's all I heard.
I stuck my head in the meter pit to turn the water off because of the leak, and I about suffocated to death.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a big one here.
You gotta be careful. Anyway,
Okay, that's all I have.
no further ado from the board or from,
Thank you all for coming
John,
up.
John,
Thank you,
thank you.
I really appreciate that.
No, and totally works with us. He left to go out to the city. I think if you work public sector and you come to the sector, it's a different animal. And, he worked hard. He's a great guy. We'd hire him back in a second. But he had a situation he really liked, and we're sad to see him go, and Joe, we stay in touch, and I are gonna get together with you. And then,
He lives
last
in
thing.
Grand Junction, right? He's the guy that lives in Grand Junction?
Yeah, and just on a different note, I had lunch with a guy last week that's one of the geothermal specialists in the area, and we talked about your deal, and he put a design together for the city of Vernal, Utah, to use hot water, do their heating all through. He's got that presentation, he said, one of these days, when you do a presentation, you guys on geothermal type heat and stuff, too, that in his mind, maybe could be incorporated in the wastewater. I'm not sure I wanna come, not with the wastewater, but sharing some trenches or whatever, because it's not drinking water.
They're all about it, so you know.
They keep reminding us of that.
Well, maybe that would be a better way to get the funding, but there might be more funding for geothermal incorporated with sanitary sewer, who knows? Anyway, I think we're all on the same page, really appreciate you guys being here in person, making me talk on television, and keep moving ahead.
Oh, indeed, it's not good.
We're gonna take care of some loose ends on our end, I hope, and have a bunch of questions or information requests and so on.
You know, I've been doing this a lot of years, and there was a time when doing the so, I mean, you guys have this is a really cost escalated in the last 5 to 7 years on things. It's that much tougher.
We get it right.
We need to do a 90% and tell us what makes sense.
Then, I don't know if it's gonna be at the
Voice our concerns and-
60%. I like, these are the changes that were understandable for us, and I know this is your first time, so you don't know exactly what Toby's said.
And I suspect that at 60%, the next big one on that, we'll pretty well have nailed down and hopefully have concurrence from you all on generally the diagrams on everything. And if that's the case, we'll start honing that cost in at that point. But from 60 to 90 and on, we can tweak things if we need to. But at that point, we're gonna have the dollars pretty well dialed in. I think it.
That's what I'm interested in. I have complete faith in you telling us where it can go and where it can, how it's gonna get there. I just wanna know about the money. Anyway,
I know, I just.
all in favor? Adjournment.
On the